Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby here with the visual effects team from Stranger Things, Michael Maher, Marion, Spates, and Jabbar Raisani. One of the biggest, I think, new elements of season 4 is the big bad, Vecna, the new villain. And I know, Michael, I think you're the illustrator responsible for coming up with this vision here. So can you walk us through what guided you towards this final look for Vecna?
Well, it's been a long time in the making. We started drawing Vecna, like versions of Vecna, in August of 2019 when the brothers were in the writer's room. So they had me just kind of sketch up some ideas, and we went through maybe 100 different versions before we got to something that we really liked. And what they wanted was, from the beginning, they were really clear about wanting it to be a bit like Freddy Krueger and have some Hellraiser vibes, and then also fit into the paradigm of our show with the Upside Down and Dungeons and Dragons in a way. So all those things kind of put together, I think we got something that fits those pieces. And of course, I did the original concepts, but then handing it off to Barry Gower, who was really instrumental in creating the practical suit, which took endless hours of hand sculpting and just like some real beautiful work, which shows up on our character and really does it right. I couldn't imagine it being a CG character now, going back and thinking about it, because that was one of the debates early on, was like, oh, should it be a CG character? Because we've done successful CG in the past, but I'm really glad that we chose to do a guy in a suit and slightly augment that with visual effects, because the performance is really key for Vecna.
Absolutely. I was very curious about hearing all of your takes on that, because Stranger Things, I think, has a really solid mix of digital effects and practical effects like Barry does. So when you do have a creature or any element that's practical like that, what's the collaboration process like with those departments? What is it? How do you look at that and say, how do I, support this?
Jabbar, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, in general, it's always a collaborative process, and especially with stuff like creatures, it's really, the more you can put on camera physically, the better off you are and the better starting point you have. So even if we are going to augment something, even if something's going to be fully digital, the more you can start with on camera, the better.
And I think Vecna has a very a scene that's kind of taken over the zeitgeist, I think, when he encounters Max in his lair in the Upside Down, but it's a space that looks different from any part of the Upside Down we've seen. It's all doused in reds, with these floating objects. What went into the creation of that space?
For that one, I did some early designs for that as well, and the idea was to riff off of what we did last season, in season 3, when 11 goes into Billy's mind, right? So it's kind of like a storm, but it's sort of a red world where there's filled with memories. And what we wanted to do with Vecna's mind layers, what we're calling it, is have his broken memories of his childhood sort of affixed in this place, where you could almost walk into the Creel house and it's just exploded everywhere, and then there's shards of the house strewn out about in the air, floating around. And that's pretty much our introduction to it, is when Max walks through it. And so that was a big set piece that the art department built. So early on, we had a really good direction on what we wanted, and then we helped out with some extension, obviously, and all the floating elements and stuff. But it was meant to be kind of like the fragmented mind of Vecna, walking into that.
Yeah. And I'm always interested, what is kind of the hardest part of having an object that has to interact with performers? Like, for instance, Max in that scene, she's wrapped up in the vines, and then she has all these rocks cascading down around her that have to look like they're really interacting there. What is that process like?
Well, for that scene in particular, it's pretty interesting because there's a variety of different things we did on set, right? For the vines around her neck, usually we would have like a rope or something tied around her, but because it's her neck, we wanted to be very sensitive to her performance and everything, so we didn't have anything there. But our vendor Rodeo, who did the vine interaction, all those vines, there was nothing there on the day. And a mixture of like Sadie's just absolute talent for carrying the torch in that episode and really doing such a great job with acting like those vines are choking her, and Rodeo's ability to pull off like a really beautiful texture, and like even the just little slime and everything that was on her neck, and the occlusion shadows and all of that stuff. It's a really complicated thing to make that look real, and I think Rodeo did a fantastic job. As for like Vecna's hand, at times we had a fully CG hand that was over her face, and there's a lot of balance whether we want to add shadow onto her face, or for example, when Fred in episode 2 is Vecnified, we'll say, the hand is CG and it protrudes into his face. And obviously we had to use a CG hand because we couldn't do that for real for poor Fred's sake. But all that stuff is just, it takes a long time to get that to look right. And it really takes a good vendor to pull it off. And I think Rodeo did an awesome job.
Yeah, and I should say Vecna is not actually the only new creature we have this season. There are those awful bats, which don't even seem to have legs, just kind of tendrils there. Maybe Marion, could you sort of describe where did those come from? What's the key to making those work?
I mean, to be honest with you, I wasn't here when they were being designed. I mean, Michael helped design them, so I don't feel comfortable talking about the history of the bats. I could talk about how the bats performed in the show, which you haven't seen a lot of those bats yet, to be honest with you, other than the bats that were in Michael's episode.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry.
Spoiler alert, there will be bats.
Yeah. But Marion was a huge part of like, getting them to interact with everyone in the episode 7 and how they were attacking the teens. I mean, it's a really difficult thing. Like you said, interaction with fully CG stuff is really challenging. And on the day, we had some rubber bats there, and we had like some eye lines and stuff, and some stuff for them to hit with the oars, but as far as like the interaction, that's a tricky thing, and Marion and Jabbar did an awesome job at like pulling that off, I think.
Sorry, I thought you were wanting to know a little bit more about the history of how it was designed, which I definitely wanted to pass that over to Michael, because again, he's the designer. But yeah, I mean, Michael just touched on that, very well. Like you try to have something there for the characters to interact with. Obviously Steve has, they put like these, it wasn't ropes. What do they have on his neck on set?
Green rubber tube.
Rubber tubes.
They were, but they were actually 3D prints of the bat tentacles that we made that were sort of like soft and rubbery that would go around the actors' necks and not hurt them.
So then he could, that way Steve can grab onto it, and that way we can put the tails in between his hands. So that way you feel like he's actually grabbing the tails. We would also animate the tails to feel like he's trying to pull them off. They would tighten when his hands are trying to adjust, and so forth.
There was another cool effect I wanted to talk about, because Jabbar, in the Massacre of Hawkins Lab, there's a lot of seamless interweaving of sort of a younger version, a de-aged Millie Bobby Brown as she goes back into that memory. We've seen this kind of technique maybe, or that a de-aging of an actor in a lot of movies or shows, but it's really hard, I think, to get the mind to go there. So what was the key to making that work for you? How did you get the viewer to buy into that?
I mean, it was lots and lots of versions and lots of trying to figure out exactly what made it look like young Millie and not a scaled down version of current Millie. And also being able to recognize her. If you pushed it too far, it was like, oh, I don't even understand who this person is. Like, it just looks like another actor that was cast that sort of looks like Millie. So it's all about finding that balance between making it look like her, but not like the older her. And we had a lot of reference of the younger her, but she's even younger than she is in season 1. So you couldn't just go back to season 1 and use that. But Michael had his episode. What was the main one that you
He
had,
was in
Michael?
1 and 5, yeah.
In 1 and 5 had a lot of that kind of work up first. So he did a lot of deving with Lola, figuring out exactly what that look was. And then Michael would take their comps and then adjust those. Just try to just on still frames, figure out, should the eyes be larger? Should they be smaller? Should they be higher? Should they be lower? It is a ton of small moves that lead to a photoreal shot in the end. And each shot is different. So while tricks that worked on this frontal shot, it's a totally different bag of tricks that work on this profile shot or this over. So you're constantly resolving the puzzle.
And does like Millie sit for any scans in part of that process, or does she provide like little kid pictures of herself, or is it just kind of experimenting on your own?
All of the above. Yeah. Yeah, their technique, they shoot her performance and then apply that on top of a stand-in that we had on the day. And so it's a variety of different, there's like projection and a little bit of 3D modeling, and then some of that plate that they shot all mixed together. And it is crazy, just the tiny things like Jabbar was stating that really make it all click together. And it's a very difficult blend to hit.
Yeah.
One thing we did too was, obviously we don't have a scan of her at the age that they wanted, but we were able to go back and grab her scan from season 1, which put her a lot closer to the age. It still wasn't the age, where we at least had the proper portions of her head when she was younger that we were using to, help everything fit together and feel like her younger head, at least silhouette and everything.
And this season really, I think, draws on a lot darker themes. It delves into, horror type inspiration for a lot of the sequences. How does that affect your approach to the visual effects work?
More blood.
Well, there's plenty of blood in your episode.
That's always my note. I think we could use some more blood here.
That's great.
Which luckily the bros dig. So
yeah.
One of the scenes I think that has kind of like that is maybe a good example to use for how things have grown, right, is Max in the mind layer with Vecna and the Red World and everything like that. Since season 1, I think a lot of what Stranger Things is about is like friendship, and I think this season, since everyone's growing older, I think that theme has to grow with the kids. And I think friendship gets a little complicated. And certainly, we've shown that with all of our characters, like Mike and Will have a complication there. And certainly Max and and Lucas and all of our other friends, there's complications there. So what that scene does so well is not only sets up the mind layer, which is like this fragmented world in like a psycho serial killer's mind, but it also sets up that when the portal opens, it's a literal bridge to her friends. Like their support is really what's going to save her life. And I think Max they built up a lot of story where she's gone through a lot of trauma, and I think she's like literally running to her friends for support. And it's like I didn't even actually think of this until everything was all done and I saw the final product, and I was like kind of reflecting on it. But it's sort of like that bridge to safety through the support of your friends. So I think that theme actually is still there, but it's grown quite a bit, obviously.
Well, speaking of themes and tone, I'm interested because you work with such a huge team, and even just with the three of you, there's folks like Michael, I think you've been there since season 2, whereas others are just kind of joining on this season. How do you all keep it a unified look and a unified theme with what you're doing when some people are just coming into the process, other people have been there for a very long time?
Obviously Michael's been here forever, so Jabbar and I just joining, we have to lean on to Michael to help us with the tone so we can keep the tone and everything like that. So it's just everyone supporting one another, learning what the bros like, obviously, and spending a lot of time watching the previous seasons too to understand like, okay, what did I just get myself into, knowing the amount of work that we need to do and the amount of time that we have to do it. So, but yeah, and it's, collaboration. That's, we're all a team, right? Not one guy goes down, we all go down together, or we all succeed together. So we just try to make sure that's in our toolbox, right?
Yeah. Well, I think this one certainly seems like a success. It has captured fans and captured a lot of people in a very big way. What is it like seeing your work, and specifically visual effects work, is used so often in promoting this show? Even, I mean, I looked up the other day and there was a Demogorgon on the Empire State Building. So what is it like seeing the reaction and the impact of this?
I mean, I don't want to go take off here. I mean, I can say this. I will say this real fast. It's funny. My wife, she loves the bros work, but she's scared to watch the show. She watched the first show. My daughter loves it. I've worked on, this is like my 49th show, right, between feature films and episodic, and it's touching to know that so many people actually like the show that you're working on. It's been a really good feeling across the board. Other than my wife not sitting and watching it with me, but other than that, it's been I don't know. It's been touching to me just to feel like all the energy and how much everyone really cares for the show. It's inspiring.
Yeah. And Michael, do you think it seems to have grown? You've seen it grow across several seasons now. What is that like, and coming back from such a hiatus too?
Yes, it seems to be exponential, the growth. And I mean, when you read the scripts, it's pretty clear from the get-go that the season's going to be bigger and more challenging than the others. But I think, because so many of us are true fans of the show, we just want to see it grow. It's dangerous. It feels like risky to really push the envelope with the show. With so many people watching, it's such a beloved thing. I was such a fan of season 1, and then I got on season 2 and I was like terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, like if I make the wrong move, I could like take apart something that I really love. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And I think, especially on our crew and all like the vendors and everybody, I'm sure they have, feel a little bit of responsibility for that, and growing it in a positive way. And I think, man, just like the addition of Jabbar and Marion and what they did in 7 and the end episodes you haven't seen yet, but oh my gosh, like it's grown so much. This show has, I mean, in visual effects alone, but like the story and everything, it's grown so much. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, we can't wait to see how it ends with the final 2. Jabbar, before we leave, can you confirm, is more blood going to be a theme for continue through 8 and 9?
There will certainly be more blood. Spoil.
Well, we'll leave it at that before we get into spoiler territory. But thank you guys so much for sitting down with me. If you're out there watching, subscribe to Gold Derby. Stay with us throughout the rest of this season. Michael, Jabbar, Marion, thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah.